The Young and the Restless spoilers Wednesday full November 19, 2025. In the charged silence of crimson lights, a storm was already forming long before Lily Winters walked through the door. Genoa City had always been a battlefield disguised as a city, corporate towers acting as watchtowers, coffee shops as neutral zones, and every conversation a negotiation of loyalty, betrayal, and old wounds that refused to die. And today, Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson were once again at the center of a familiar, dangerous orbit, one that tugged at the past while threatening to reshape everything around them. Adam had arrived early, seeking a moment of clarity after the chaos at Newman Enterprises, but clarity was never something he found easily. Chelsea's arrival was meant to be a casual attempt at conversation, one of those half-serious, half-playful exchanges that had always defined them. But it only took a few seconds for the tension between them to resurface. She tossed a peanut at him like she was flicking away frustration, but Adam, amused for a split second, pulled her toward him with an instinct he didn't fully understand. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew he shouldn't blur the lines, but blurring lines was what Adam did best. Their kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't even intentional. It was impulsive, reckless, loaded with memories neither of them had the courage to acknowledge. And when it happened, Chelsea pulled away breathlessly, muttering something about Arabesque and how everything had spiraled out of control. The collapse of Arabesque, once a bold venture she and Adam had pinned their hopes on, had left scars, and neither of them could deny the trail of blame that followed. Chelsea admitted, almost reluctantly, that she felt a sliver of pity for Kane Ashby, who had been caught in the crossfire of Newman ruthlessness and corporate sabotage. But Adam couldn't summon sympathy. To him, Kane was reaping the consequences of his own questionable decisions. What Adam didn't expect, what neither of them expected, was the voice that cut sharply across the room the moment those dismissive words left his mouth. "Excuse me?" Lily Winters' tone sliced through the air like a blade, sharp enough to halt both Adam and Chelsea mid-breath. Lily didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. Her presence alone carried authority, strength, and the kind of emotional clarity that came from years of heartbreak, rebuilding, and rediscovering who she was beyond the chaos that life had thrown at her. Lily had walked in just in time to hear Adam claim Kane deserved what had happened, and her expression held a calm fury that ran deeper than anger. She stood upright, shoulders squared, the picture of someone who had drawn a line between past and present and refused to let anyone step over it. "I don't think Kane deserved what you and your family did to him," she said, each word enunciated with quiet conviction. Adam bristled, not used to being confronted so directly without warning. He countered by insisting that whoever stole Arabesque was simply giving Kane a taste of his own medicine, declaring that Kane's downfall was his own fault. But Lily wasn't done. "We all know it was your father," she said evenly, not bothering to soften the accusation. "Victor doesn't make moves without purpose, and it's obvious he wanted Kane destroyed." The truth of that statement lingered between them, heavy, undeniable. Chelsea glanced between them, feeling the friction build like heat. And then, with a tilt of her head, she asked what she truly wanted to know: "Why are you defending him, Lily? What changed?" It was a fair question, one that carried layers of history, heartbreak, resentment, and memory. Lily inhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I haven't changed," she said. "Kane just deserves a chance to prove himself. That's it. Everyone does." She explained, not defensively but firmly, that Kane had made mistakes, but mistakes didn't erase the years he had spent trying to be a better man. Mistakes didn't mean he deserved to be torn down by a company with limitless power or be used as collateral damage in the Newman family's endless cycle of dominance and retaliation. She went further, saying that if the Newmans backed off, if they stopped twisting every situation into another battlefield, maybe her family could finally heal. But Chelsea, whose relationship with Kane was tangled in both resentment and reluctant empathy, interjected. "Then tell him to stop fighting," she said. "Tell Kane to stop the war he started." Those words hung in the air, almost mocking in their simplicity, because nothing in Genoa City was ever as simple as stopping a fight. It wasn't just business rivalry anymore. It was pride, fear, survival, history, resentment, and the knowledge that every step someone took could change the balance of power for months, even years. And this was where the story deepened, not because of what was said, but because of what each character carried internally but couldn't say out loud. Lily's defense of Kane wasn't born from romantic longing or denial. It came from a place of personal evolution. She had built a life out of ashes before. She had learned to recognize when someone was trying, truly trying, to rise again. She knew better than anyone what it meant to be judged by past mistakes and denied the chance to grow. Chelsea, on the other hand, had always lived with a heart split between guilt and desire. She didn't hate Kane, she hated the version of herself she became when chaos followed her. And Adam? Adam was a walking contradiction. He was fiercely protective, obsessively loyal, but ruthlessly quick to strike when he felt threatened. To him, everything was strategy. Everyone's actions were either weapons or defenses. Kane's collapse wasn't tragedy, it was predictable fallout. And yet, somewhere inside Adam's cold logic, the mention of Victor's involvement hit a nerve he refused to show. Because Adam knew Lily wasn't wrong. Victor Newman didn't destroy people randomly. He didn't move pieces on the board without long-term purpose. If Kane was crushed under Victor's heel, it was because Victor had already decided Kane was a threat, or a tool to be eliminated for convenience. The more Lily challenged him, the more Adam felt the crack widening inside his carefully constructed certainty. He hated that she could see what he refused to acknowledge. Meanwhile, outside the safety of the conversation, the tension in Genoa City was spreading like wildfire. Kane was spinning, pushed into corners he didn't even know existed. Victor's shadow loomed over him like a predator assessing prey. And the more Kane resisted, the more dangerous the situation became. Lily could sense it, not because anyone told her, but because she had known Kane's emotional rhythms for half her life. Something in him was unraveling. Something in him was fighting too hard. Something in him was on the edge. And despite everything, despite the heartbreak, despite the pain he caused her through the years, Lily couldn't stand by and watch Kane be destroyed by a family who treated corporate war like a blood sport. She wasn't defending a man she wanted back. She was defending human decency. When she finally turned and walked away, leaving Adam and Chelsea in a silence too heavy to break, she felt the weight of what she had done settle on her shoulders. She knew Kane wouldn't see her intervention as loyalty. He might even resent it. But Lily also knew the truth. Kane had reached a point where he needed someone to tell him he wasn't alone in this fight, not as a wife, not as a lover, but as someone who believed he still had worth. And for the first time in years, Lily felt clarity. She wasn't choosing sides in a war. She was choosing compassion. The tragedy, the inevitable tragedy, was that compassion in Genoa City was often the spark that lit the match for an even bigger explosion. And somewhere deep in the city, Kane was preparing for a confrontation of his own, one that would drag Phyllis Summers into the fire, push old wounds into open conflict, and force Lily, Adam, and Chelsea to face the consequences of the choices they made today. Because Kane Ashby wasn't done fighting. And once he argued with Phyllis's loud, volatile, emotional. The entire balance between Winters, Ashby, Newman, and Lawson families would shift again. And this time, no one would walk away unscathed. The evening had already settled into that familiar Genoa City stillness, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful at all, but instead felt like the moment before a storm breaks open and drenches everything in truth, chaos, and consequences. Lily Winters felt that storm inside her as she pushed open the glass door of the bar and walked in with a stiffness in her shoulders that betrayed the hit she'd taken earlier. She didn't even wait for the bartender to approach. She slid onto a stool, placed her palm on the polished surface, and ordered a glass of wine in a voice that held both exhaustion and defiance. When the wine arrived, she didn't savor it, didn't warm to its taste, didn't give herself a moment to breathe. She lifted the glass and drank it down quickly, almost angrily, as if the burn could purge the emotional residue clinging to her. But the burn didn't make anything clearer. Instead, it pulled forward the fragments of recent conversations with Kane, moments she had tried to neatly compartmentalize but now spilled into her mind with an unwanted force. She remembered his frustration, the way his voice vibrated with wounded pride. She remembered the hurt he tried to hide, the stubbornness that pushed her away, the anger that wasn't truly directed at her but at the world closing in on him. And she remembered how easily she had dismissed him in their last conversation, choosing emotional distance when all she wanted was clarity. Now that distance tasted bitter. She exhaled and pulled out her phone. Logic said she shouldn't call him, not when wine hummed through her bloodstream and emotions churned beneath the surface. But logic had never governed her heart where Kane was concerned. The call went to voicemail. Her chest tightened. "Kane, it's me," she began, her voice softer than she intended. "I shouldn't have acted the way I did earlier. I'm sorry. I was only trying to defend you." She hesitated, swallowing irritation at herself, at him, at everything. I don't know. Just call me back, okay?" She hung up quickly, jaw tightening as she placed the phone face down. The apology left a sour taste in her mouth, not because she didn't mean it, but because she hated the uncertainty embedded in their dynamic. She hated defending him to Adam and Chelsea, only to feel foolish afterward. She hated the part of herself that still cared. She hated the hold he still had on her, even now. Meanwhile, across the city, Kane Ashby was trying very hard not to think about Lily's voice, her anger, or her sudden switch to concern. Tonight, he wanted a distraction, and Phyllis Summers, fiery, unpredictable, and alluringly dangerous, was the perfect one. Their dinner together wasn't romantic at first, it was two conspirators sharing the same battlefield, both bruised by choices and consequences, both too proud to admit how deeply they'd been hurt. But something shifted halfway through the evening. Maybe it was the dim lighting reflecting against Phyllis's hair, or the way she leaned in with a mixture of challenge and curiosity when she asked, "What happened with Lily? Did she turn you down?" Kane didn't appreciate the bluntness, but Phyllis thrived in places where honesty cut like a blade. He admitted nothing directly, but the absence of denial told her everything she needed to know. She studied him carefully, tapping her fingernail against her glass. "You're attracted to me," she said, not as a question but as a statement delivered with her signature cocktail of confidence and provocation. Kane didn't flinch. "I am," he said simply. Phyllis smirked, satisfied but not surprised. Then they talked about his motives, his desperation to reclaim control, to restore his company, to regain the version of himself that wasn't constantly pushed aside or sabotaged. And Phyllis, ever the strategist, leaned back and said, "You can get what you want, Kane. Just fight for your family and you'll win." The words wrapped around him like a challenge, but she didn't stop there. She tilted her head, her voice dropping lower. "But I'm sure you already have a backup plan." Kane's lips curved into a slow, unreadable smile. That was all the confirmation she needed. "I'll take that as a yes," she whispered. Kane countered by asking why she seemed to be running her own playbook tonight. Phyllis let out a small laugh. "I always have a plan, Kane. That's the difference between people like me and people like your beloved Newmans. They act like they're always 3 steps ahead, but the truth is, they underestimate everyone. Especially you." Something dangerous flickered in Kane's expression as he leaned closer. "I have an idea," he murmured. "Why don't you invite me up to your room, pour me a drink, and tell me everything you're not saying here?" It wasn't a question. It was an invitation drenched in temptation, challenge, and all the emotional volatility they'd been ignoring. Phyllis hesitated just long enough to make him wonder, then she gave him a smile that promised trouble. "All right," she said, and they left together. Once the door to Phyllis's room closed behind them, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Gone were the polite boundaries of the restaurant. Gone were the casual tones. Here, everything felt charged, raw, and stripped of pretense. She poured the drinks, but Kane never touched his. Instead, he stepped closer, eyes narrowing slightly. "Tell me," he said quietly, "did you steal the AI software? Did you take my company out from under me?" Phyllis froze, not out of guilt, but out of indignation. "No," she said sharply. "I didn't." Kane didn't back off. "You expect me to believe that?" "Believe what you want," she snapped, turning away just enough to show she wasn't intimidated, but not so far that she broke the magnetic pull between them. "You think I'd sabotage you? You think I'd go through all this trouble just to, what? Watch you fall?" "I think you always have an angle," Kane said. "I think you're always playing someone. And I think you're capable of anything when you want something badly enough." She turned back to him slowly, her gaze lingering on his mouth, his jaw, his eyes, on the anger that looked too much like desire. "You don't know what I'm capable of," she whispered. "Then show me." It was the spark that ignited everything. What followed wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't even rational. It was two wounded souls colliding, two flawed people grasping for control, validation, and escape in the only way they knew how. Kane pulled her into his arms with a hunger formed from frustration, loneliness, and the need to feel wanted by someone who didn't look at him with disappointment. Phyllis responded with equal force, challenging, daring, matching him beat for beat. Their lips crashed together, not in softness but in fire. Their hands explored out of instinct, not romance. Their breaths tangled in urgency, not tenderness. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the explosion of something that had been simmering beneath every conversation, every look, every moment of shared ambition. When they finally collapsed into each other, the storm outside the window had begun to build, silent, dark, inevitable, mirroring the storm they had just unleashed. And somewhere across Genoa City, Lily Winters sat alone in the bar, staring at her phone, unaware that the man she had just defended was now in the arms of the one woman who could destroy him all over again. At Crimson Lights, the kind of cool, late-morning calm that usually protected the coffee shop from drama shattered the moment Claire Grace spotted Holden Novak standing near the counter, stirring his coffee like a man trying to buy himself purpose. It wasn't that she expected to see him here, far from it. Los Angeles felt a lifetime away, another world entirely, filled with neon lights, impulsive decisions, and a version of herself she didn't fully recognize anymore. But seeing Holden now, here in Genoa City of all places, instantly tightened something in her chest. Their eyes met, and the awkwardness between them formed instantly, sharp and immediate, like the shimmering heat of a stove left on too long. She approached cautiously, her fingers curling around the strap of her purse as if grounding herself. "We should probably talk about what happened in Los Angeles," she said quietly, keeping her voice neutral even as her mind replayed the night in question. Holden's lips twitched in a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What happens in Hollywood stays in Hollywood." He said it lightly, as though the cliché could erase the complexity of the truth they shared, but Claire didn't flinch. She stood straighter, her tone calm, almost fragile in its honesty. She told him she was still figuring herself out, still trying to understand where she fit in her own life, her family, and whatever future she was supposed to build. "I want to be honest with the people I care about," she added, her voice softening. "That night, Halloween, I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. I wasn't ready for any of it." Holden sighed, running a hand across his jaw as though he could iron out everything unsaid between them. He confessed that he'd felt something shifting that night. That he thought when they came back here, and when they ran into Kyle Abbott at the lake. The old pull of her past world would snap her right back into place, leaving him as nothing more than a temporary escape. He meant it as an observation, not an accusation, but Claire still felt the weight of the implication. She met his eyes without wavering. "The only thing I love," she said quietly, "is that child." His daughter, the baby who had become a brief, unexpected point of light in Claire's chaotic life, was the one part of Los Angeles she missed without hesitation. But love for a child didn't translate to romantic readiness. "That doesn't mean I'm ready to jump into another relationship," she finished, honest and resolute. She admitted the night had been fun, unexpected, reckless, and thrilling. But she also said she didn't know whether it would happen again, not because she didn't like him, but because she didn't trust her own emotional stability yet. Holden nodded, though disappointment glimmered beneath the surface. "I thought you were pulling away because of what I told you," he said, letting a trace of vulnerability seep through. Claire shook her head gently. She wasn't afraid because of him, she was afraid because she had done far worse things in her past. Things she couldn't erase. Things she regretted every day. Then she looked at him intently, her voice lowering. "Do you regret what you and Audra did?" Holden hesitated. And that hesitation, not the words he eventually forced out, was the answer Claire heard loudest. She had learned to read hesitation well. It always meant there was more beneath the surface than someone wanted to reveal. So she asked another question, sharper this time. Was there anything else about that night, anything he hadn't told her? But before he could answer, before the truth could rise or collapse between them, the door swung open and a familiar presence filled the room like a sudden temperature drop. Audra Charles. With her perfect hair, perfect posture, and perfect smugness, she sauntered forward, her heels striking the floor in firm, confident taps. "Isn't this sweet?" she said with a smirk that was designed to cut. "Are you two a couple now?" Holden stiffened immediately. "Audra, stop." But Audra never stopped, not when she sensed blood, not when she sensed leverage, and certainly not when she sensed competition. She arched an eyebrow and cocked her head, her tone gliding into something mocking and cruel. "Poor Kyle," she murmured. Prince Dull managed to lose the girl he wanted to a shameless Hollywood player. Claire didn't move at first. She simply absorbed the insult like a wave hitting rock, unmoved, unbroken. Then she exhaled slowly, and her next words landed with icy precision. "Los Angeles was fun," she said calmly, "but I'm sure back in the day, you had way more fun than any of us." Audra's smile froze. Claire's tone sharpened. "Tell me, Audra, ever been to the Shadow Room?" Audra blinked, taken aback for the first time. The faintest crack formed in her facade. "There are a lot of clubs in LA," she said casually, but her voice carried a new tightness. Before Claire could press further, Holden stepped between them, palms up like a referee. "That's enough." "Really?" But Audra's adrenaline was already rising. "Oh, we're having fun," she said. Her eyes glittered with challenge. Claire leaned in slightly, her expression cool. "I can change that with one phone call." The threat was calm, almost casual, and that made it infinitely more dangerous. Audra's smile faltered. She stepped forward in retaliation, and the hostility crackled between the two women like electricity arcing off live wires. Holden finally moved fully between them, a human shield preventing the moment from exploding into something irreversible. He urged Claire to leave with him, suggested they get a drink somewhere else, anywhere else, before Audra dragged things deeper into the mud. But Claire kept her gaze locked on Holden, as if Audra no longer existed. "You still haven't answered my question," she said, her voice low. Audra blinked. "What question?" Claire didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed on Holden, unblinking, unwavering. "You'll find out soon," Claire said with quiet, ominous confidence. "Everyone will."